Ciao tutti! We are back with Food is a Conversation Alumni Edition. Today is our seventh session already. If you have missed the previous live conversations, we are actually hosting these events to introduce all of the ecosystem members who attended any of the Future Food educational programs. Let it be the Food Innovation Master Program, summer schools, or last year the first boot camps organized by the Institute as a joint project with FAO. During these short 30-minute sessions, you will hear their personal stories, you will hear about their local food systems, and we will also discuss how do they experience the current situation in their local environment. Today is actually I'm not only hosting one, but two alumni who actually met on a summer course in 2016 in Sicily. Hi, there we go, Julia and Julien. Hi, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes, yes. It's good to see you.
Okay, and the setup is perfect. We can see you both, so that's perfect. All right. So I was just telling the audience that these sessions are happening twice a week, once on Tuesday and once on Thursday, in order to introduce our ecosystem globally. And today we have Julia and Julian dialing in from Okinawa. And if our time allows, we will also have some time to answer your questions. So please, if you do, just post it in the chat. And now, without any further ado, I would hand over and ask them to introduce themselves.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Julia.
I'm Julien.
The JJ, as some people called us in Sicily.
Where we became.
Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, I love that you're Julia, so it's like JJJ.
Yes. Exactly, a triple J.
Yeah, triple J. Yeah, we met in Sicily in 2016 at the Food Innovation Summer School in Sicily, in Messina. And yeah, obviously it's changed our lives both professionally and also personally because we met there, fell in love, got married, and then, you
And spent some time in Sweden, the States,
yeah,
and then
kind
in
of a
Tokyo, and now Okinawa.
whirlwind.
And now we're waiting to move to Hong Kong. So
Yeah.
Wow.
and places.
So your journey together basically started with Future Food. I am really happy to showcase this story now. It's so romantic. So can you please maybe tell me a bit, what was your background and how did you end up joining the summer school?
Yeah, sure. So my background is in journalism and publications, and prior to the Food Innovation Summer School, I was working in different nonprofits and writing about many different topics. But my passion has always been food, um, both just because I love to eat and cook. I have a lot of nutritionists in my family, and so I wanted to I wanted to start focusing more on food storytelling. And then a good friend of mine, Melanie, who owned a gluten-free store in Sacramento where I lived at the time, told me about the Food Innovation Summer School, and I applied, and yeah, I'm glad that I ended up joining that experience.
Yes.
And so I'm a industrial designer, so designing consumer products. Over the years, I kind of got more into design thinking, innovation management. And in 2016, I had just completed like coaching one of those embedded design thinking projects that people involved also with Future Food Institute were conducting with Berla. So I coached the first one with Berla Sweden. And that was the first time that I had kind of coached an innovation project to do with food. I am honestly not particularly a foodie myself, but I thought that but I thought that like the specificities of innovating with food were super fascinating. So I decided to join the summer school to learn more about that.
Nice. So would you mind maybe tell us a bit more about the summer school? So I myself, I attended the master program, which was 12 months, but your experience, if I'm not mistaken, was 6 weeks or 3 weeks long, one of the two?
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of got a compressed version of what Future Food has to offer, and you also had a hackathon during that time. So could you please tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it started with a series of workshops. The first one was in design thinking, which was super interesting for me. I also have a background in graphic design, but this was the first time I really could, the first time I had the opportunity to really explore that approach to innovation. And so we had a few like mini workshops in design thinking. Then we had a series of field trips as well. It was a combination of like how food relates to nutrition, science, technology, agriculture in the Mediterranean and Sicily. So we visited many farms where they grow tomatoes and citrus fruits, and also visited some breweries and wineries. So we had loads of fun.
And chocolate.
And chocolate. That was my favorite, the chocolate factory. So it was just like this amazing sensorial experience where we got to really dive deep and explore through all the senses what the food system and in the environment is like in Sicily. So it was amazing. And then, as you mentioned, we had a hackathon at the very end, where we worked in teams. And
it was like the last week.
Yeah.
And we were going to present at the Agro Generation.
Yeah,
was the name of the event, right?
I believe. Yeah, we went to Catania for a conference hosted by Future Food and other partners, and we were in different teams. My team was focused on tourism, agro-tourism, where we had, during the hackathon, developed a map app that connected tourists directly with the producers throughout Sicily, through food storytelling. So it was very interactive, and we had a lot of fun developing that. We called it Farmony. Yeah. And what?
And mine was called Zagara.
Zagara.
Still trying to pronounce it right. It was so that's the thing. We got into separate teams, and I think we were presented challenges by kind of sponsors or like real actors of the Sicilian kind of food ecosystem. And remember, the team that I was in, we picked a challenge from someone who was involved with a farm of ornamental plants, and in particular, citrus trees.
Okay.
And they had this big challenge that essentially they were being commoditized, like just competing for the cheapest price for big distribution kind of thing.
Exactly.
And we came up with, we were thinking, well, a plant, you need to take care of it, and often it's something nice to do with the children. So we came up with kind of a subscription service where all through the year, through the seasons and when the fruit come and those things, that you receive stories that you get to kind of read to your children and interact with the plant.
Nice.
And it was kind of a way to really make those plants way more than just a commodity, to make them something like central to the family, something that can tell stories.
Yeah. I think storytelling and creating a narrative which can bring end consumers closer to the supply chain or other members in the value chain is so crucial. And I do believe that right now we might have a restart in the food system where there are multiple initiatives again starting to kick off these relationships. And I'm so happy that you told about this, because I think your experience also showcases how Future Food is trying to create educational programs which have a holistic approach to the food system. So starting from agriculture, going through even distribution or manufacturing to the end consumer, you kind of cover, disregarding the fact how long is your program, you cover all of these elements, and this also helps to understand how are the interrelations in our food system. So after the summer school, you left Sicily, and as you mentioned, you already traveled to multiple different countries together. So what happened with you afterwards? I know that Julia has been involved in some of the future food projects and once returned to Italy as well to work on the lexicon of food. So maybe if you could tell us a bit about these projects afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, right after the Food Innovation Summer School, like you said, we traveled a little bit and then ended up settling in Tokyo for Julian's job in innovation. And I almost immediately got involved with the Future Food Institute again. I went back to Italy for the Lexicon of Food, which was I think a 3-week program as well, with participants, artists from all over the world. We started actually collaborating remotely using Zoom, and we were creating we were taking photos in our respective countries that help illustrate different lexicon, different terms in our food system. And because we were coming from many different countries, we could explore vocabulary in different languages as well. So for me, it was super interesting. Like, you know, we had just moved to Japan. We were trying to learn the language. So this was, I think food is a beautiful way to kind of try to learn a new language as well. So the words that I ended up choosing for my artworks were mottainai, which means don't waste. And so there are actually a few mottainai projects and initiatives throughout the world now. And they use the word to mean like reuse, reduce, recycle. It's often used by the stereotype in Japan is that like you hear the grandmother in the kitchen say mottainai when there's food maybe being wasted in the kitchen.
That's something else you're involved with, Motana Grandma.
Yeah. So that actually, these words that I chose, both mottainai and another word, wabi-sabi, ended up being kind of my sort of my anthem or my mantra throughout my experience in Japan, because I got involved in editing a book called Mottainai Grandma. Actually, the animation series, which is a book for children, with the character who's grandma named Mottainai Grandma, and it's a beautiful. It's now being translated in many languages, including English and Italian, and French and Chinese, and many languages. So I'll be sharing a lot more about that later. And then another word that I chose for the project was wabi-sabi, which means, it's hard to describe wabi-sabi, but it's basically like the Japanese aesthetic that sees beauty and imperfection and finds like wisdom in nature, like the impermanence that we find in nature, like the aging process, for example, and decomposition and compost and things like that. And so through this, what this project allowed me to do was take these concepts and create these information artworks that became part of an exhibit in Italy. So there were around 20 of us who created these information artworks. Each artwork represented a different word. So we had a really fun exhibit in Bergamo that was part of a conference. So yeah, so that was an amazing experience. Actually, I still am in touch with a lot of the participants, and we have like monthly calls, Zoom calls. So
That's great.
yeah, it's been amazing. And then with Wabi Sabi, I've been involved in a few projects related to Wabi Sabi. One of them is a series, a lunch series called We Are Wabi Sabi. And it started off as kind of a women's group. And we talk about what Wabi Sabi means for us personally, but also I've collaborated with a chef named Mika Fran, who, and also some farms who have donated what we are calling wabi-sabi vegetables. So these are the vegetables that, you know, have like kind of odd shapes and are considered imperfect, like imperfect produce.
Especially in Japan, where there's an obsession with the absolute perfection and perfect size of every single produce.
Yeah. So that's kind of the irony, or one of the contradictions that we've discovered in Japan, is that there's this traditional concept of seeing the beauty in imperfection, but there's also an obsession with perfection. So when you go to the grocery store, most of the fruit is absolutely perfect and quite expensive and covered in a lot of plastic. So that was something that really surprised us when we moved here. But this Wabi Sabi project, I think one of the intentions and the goals is to embrace these imperfections in food as a way to reduce waste. There's a...
So maybe I will use the fact that I have two of you on the call right now and ask you, Julia, to maybe write in the chat the words what you just mentioned, and if there is a way how people can get access to those 20 pieces what you mentioned, so that the outcome of the project, that would be great. And while you do that, I will ask Julien to maybe tell us a bit more about the local food system in Japan. So you already explained a few points. Finding beauty in imperfection, but still being obsessed with perfection, and that you have all these plastic packaging. I assume this has a lot to do with food safety reasons, because if it's packed, they know that it's safe. So if you could tell us a bit more about the food system and how you see that, for example, changing right now during the pandemic.
So as I understand it, so I'm not sure how much the overpackaging has to do with safety. Although I can really see that these days during COVID and post COVID that might really play a role. But as I understand it, basically a lot of the supply chains really expect produce to be at different stages of the supply chain, that they expect it to always be a certain size, a certain color, a certain quality, and that anything that will not fit that standard automatically gets rejected. Which obviously creates a lot of waste, and which also means that anything that falls outside of that perfection just doesn't get in. When it comes to the overpackaging, I mean, I think it's really there is a tradition in Japan to as a little bit. I see it as like the tradition of the shopkeeper taking good care of the customer. That like nicely packaging to show care. And as I understand it, the over packaging that we see in stores is a little bit like a modern extension of that the even though the store has become a bit more faceless than it used to be when it was just a small shopkeeper, they're still trying to show this care. So I see it as more of a care than literally cleanliness as we Westerners might see it. But I think that the way we've reacted, I guess, as outsiders, though, is that sometimes it feels really nice when you have someone who really packages something nicely for you and you see that there's a craft to it. But sometimes when we just, I don't know, when we just want an apple, we're ready to like just rinse it when we get home, and it's fine if it has touched shipping crates and other people's hands. These days, maybe that's a different concern.
Yeah.
But
There was
up until a few months ago.
I read an article in the Japan Times about how plastic was out and there was strong efforts to reduce plastic packaging, but then COVID happened. And now, because of this fear that food can spread the virus, there's been reintroduction of the plastic. So this is an opportunity to look at alternative solutions. So we're not using so much plastic, but still at least having the feeling of being safe and ensuring food safety. Like you said, Julian, it's also a cultural thing to package things with care. And traditionally it was used with cloth, these beautiful textiles. And I think there is one of them is called tenugui, and
reusable, basically.
And it's reusable, almost like, in fact, some people are making masks out of them as well, the reusable cloth masks. So I think that it's a more sustainable option to use these reusable cloths, and that's what was the tradition. And I hope that it'll be come back into the mainstream a little bit more in the future.
Yeah, I think it also has a lot to do with the logistic system, because as much as packaging is reusable, how do you return it to the manufacturer, to the food distributor? And I think this is where we still lack some kind of a connection in the chain, how to reloop all these materials in the system. So we are approaching to the end, and I know that there was one more project where I actually missed meeting you in person because I happened to be in Hong Kong while the other half of the team was in Tokyo during the global mission. So I know that the others had the opportunity to meet you, and you have been involved afterwards also in the publishing of the Food Shaper books. So I wanted to hear your perspective on that project, because my perspective is rather writing it and putting all that crazy content what we experienced during 60 days into one book. So how did you experience that work?
It was so interesting to have the opportunity to kind of curate some of the experiences in Japan. Which is one of my passions, just like curating, experience design, that kind of thing, and to do it with people from all over the world, from different backgrounds related to food. And I was, more kind of like serving as a guide, which allowed me to learn so much more about the food system in Japan myself, and meet more producers and interesting people. Like, for example, we had a workshop where we learned about lab-grown meat. There is a fellow here, Yuki Hanyu, who's making lab-grown meat kits that people can actually grow in their own homes. Yeah.
Shoji meat, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, shoji meat. So then to see these incredible students, master students, fellows, take these experiences, dive deeper into the research and putting it in context globally, and then put it, write these pieces for a book, it was just really cool to see how it evolved from the very start to these beautifully designed books, Food Shapers. So I had the chance to serve as a bit of an editor, so I got to read all of the research, learned so much, and yeah, I mean, I hope it's something that we can do again. Just the storytelling aspect was really powerful.
Great. So you told me that you are moving to Hong Kong for your next challenge. That would kind of lead into my final question as well. How did you experience the changes in your food system over the last few weeks? And what do you wish for yourself as the next steps or changes in the food system and in your personal or professional life?
I think if we're gonna say very much on a daily basis, so I think already in Tokyo pre-COVID, we used to go to the grocery store or the convenience store very spontaneously. Just, oh, we need this, we need that, let's cook this or that tonight. Whereas more recently, starting in Tokyo, now in Okinawa, we're planning a lot more because we're avoiding going to these public places too often. But something really nice that we've discovered here is we cycle around the countryside, and we found quite a few opportunities to buy like local produce, which in this case is not overpackaged at all.
Right.
Also,
yeah.
so that's been very, very interesting. Like we're having this local aspect much more than we did in Tokyo. And I think also maybe because we find these local producers as part of a little outing that gives us a change from isolating ourselves. It has more value, more value than just like a commodity in a grocery store.
Yeah.
We're going
It's an event. It's like a date.
Yeah.
Going to the grocery store.
And we've got the pineapple that we brought back.
The local pineapple here, I don't know if you've seen it. You can like peel each berry out of the pineapple and eat it.
Oh, wow.
It's really cool. Yeah, the Japanese variety. So we love the tropical fruit. We're surrounded by farms here. And also, we've had some food delivered. I'm guessing a lot of people are doing that these days. When we first moved to Tokyo, I was looking for like a CSA, and I had trouble finding one in English that I could easily access. But then our friend Mika Fran, the chef from the Wabi Sabi project, she connected us with a CSA, and we were getting like a weekly or bi-weekly box of local organic veggies, which was wonderful.
Nice.
But then we stopped that. But since then, I've heard that there are a lot more farms offering CSAs now because of COVID. Because a lot of people, they can't leave their home, and you can imagine.
Yes, and also the farms cannot deliver to food service right now, I assume, because food service completely, like if not didn't shut down, they have a lower volume, and what farmers would distribute to restaurant has to be redistributed to end consumers. And yes, the variety changed for end consumers drastically everywhere because of that. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah. So what's your next step in Hong Kong? What is waiting for you?
So we're moving to Hong Kong eventually. Still waiting on the visas. Part of the delay is also due to COVID. I'll be working there. I'm actually kind of starting remotely already as innovation director for the Asia Pacific region for Colgate. And interestingly, I was thinking about the link also, the Hong Kong and food and rural and city. I'm just thinking a little thing to add about Hong Kong. We both had the cliche when we first thought about Hong Kong of like, you know, that forest of skyscrapers. But we quickly discovered that there was this other side of Hong Kong, which is very rural, and
Yes.
that the two are not actually very far from each other. So we're going to try probably to live rurally, maybe even have access to some locally produced food, while being in that close proximity to the city.
Yeah.
Kind of best of both worlds.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of initiatives. We've visited the territory where you have more the rural part. We went to a farm there, and we also met a lady who is involved in oh my God, now the word won't come to my mind. Oh my God, permaculture. Yes, permaculture projects there, and funny enough, in Hong Kong, besides this territory, you have more like surface where you can grow on rooftops than on land. So you have a lot of urban gardening projects going on as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
yeah.
you will find your new community to source with. I'm pretty sure about that.
Oh, we'd love some introductions.
Yeah, we would love to chat with you more about Hong Kong, for sure.
Yes, very happy to share all those connections. So Julien, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure for me as well to meet you and hear a bit more about your story. We are continuing with the sessions next week, Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Central European time. And yeah, we will just keep introducing all the Future Food alumni. Thank you so much again. And I wish you all the best and a smooth move to Hong Kong. And I will be in touch to give you all those connections.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.